Hi, I'm Jamie Giroux, and today I'm going to be talking about my work promoting curiosity to promote learning, a study of curiosity and question asking. I want to start just by acknowledging my collaborators, Ginny Vitello and Sharon Zumburn, and the funders of this work, the John Templeton Foundation and the Jacobs Foundation, as well as, of course, my students who are very important for getting this work done. So I want to start out by talking about my conceptualization of curiosity, which specifically is preference for and comfort with uncertainty. This is based on the information gap theory by George Loewenstein, that people report being most curious and explore the most when there's this optimal or medium level of uncertainty. So what we're interested in looking at is, what drives children to know, or what level of uncertainty can we provide that's most likely to get them to explore. And we also have found in our work that the peak of this curve varies. So we have this assumption that higher curiosity is indicated by exploration when there's greater uncertainty, and therefore more that can be learned, and that this is influenced both by individual differences and by the context itself. The reason why I'm interested in studying children's curiosity is specifically to look at how curiosity can support learning in academic contexts. And there's a good amount of literature showing that curiosity does relate to academic performance and academic learning. So for example, curiosity relates to academic performance even when controlling for students' effort and ability. And curiosity can support learning more generally by helping with motivation, specifically in developing sustained interest, which in turn promotes self-regulation and information-seeking behaviors. Using the curiosity task that specifically looks at uncertainty preference in young children, prior research has found that when children are more curious, they ask more questions, and they're better able to recognize effective questions. And when children are exploring, those who are more curious or have higher uncertainty preference also seem to learn more from that exploration. So in thinking about how we can promote curiosity to promote learning, we went back to our operationalization, and we thought about how if we want children to become more curious, we may need to help them to become more comfortable with uncertainty and better at seeking the information needed to resolve uncertainty. So that's what we tried to do. We tried to think about how can we help children become more comfortable with and more aware of uncertainty and better able to recognize what information they need and how to get it. So our research questions were, does curiosity relate to learning? Does using questions for problem solving relate to curiosity? And can curiosity promoting language influence children's use of questions for problem solving? In our first task, which we call Explore and Learn, we looked at children's free exploration. And all of our data were collected online due to COVID-19. So children played these games through Zoom with a research assistant, and we gave them screen control so they could actually kind of click through and explore on their own. So in this game, there were 9 shapes, and children could click a shape to hear fun information about one of the topics along the bottom of the screen. If they clicked the same shape, they heard more information about the same topic. And if they clicked a different shape, they heard information about different topics. You can see again the different things they might have learned about along the bottom of the screen. So they could click each shape up to 3 times to learn 3 facts about that topic, and that this related to this. And this created 27 potential opportunities for learning, or things that children could learn. At the end of the task, when children either had explored all 27 pieces of information or indicated that they were done with the game, they were asked what they could recall that they had learned on the task. And then we showed them 4 of these pictures along the bottom to kind of provide some cue for recall. And we asked them again what they learned. And then finally, we ended the task by asking them what else they would like to know. So a way of kind of open-ended gathering, what are they curious about learning? Our second task was a mystery animal game, and this is our questions for problem solving task. And this was used for that question of, will children ask different numbers of questions if they hear different curiosity promoting instructions? So all children played this game, but there were a few slight differences that we'll talk about when we get to that research question. But in general, children were told that they have a game where there's a mystery animal, and to play the game, they have to be a zoo detective and try to find clues about that animal. We intentionally made the animal very challenging to guess. Only, I think, 2 children in our whole sample did end up guessing it, and one of them had already heard from another sibling what it was. So children mostly didn't guess this because we wanted to make sure that they could ask as many questions as they could think of without the challenge of, if a child figures out what questions to ask to find out what the animal is after only a couple questions, it might look like they can't ask as many questions or can't think of as many questions to ask as other children, when really they just didn't need to ask those questions. So we intentionally made it something that most children were not able to guess. So this resulted in the following variables. For the free exploration task, we had the information seeking measure of the number of facts explored. Recall was assessed by the responses to that question, what did you learn? And curiosity was assessed by responses to the question of what would you like to know? And then for the questions for problem solving tasks, we just looked at the numbers of questions children asked. And we did split these into open-ended and closed-ended questions. So for participants in our study, we had 71 children, and they were about 7 years of age, about 2/3 female, 1/3 male. And again, for that mystery animal task, we had 3 different versions, and we randomly assigned them to one of those versions, but all of the children completed the same explore and learn. We did have 2 different versions where we showed different prompts or cues for recall. So some children saw 4 pictures, and then the other half of the children saw different 4 pictures, but that didn't seem to make any difference in their recall. We did have an additional 18 children who participated, but collecting data online has been quite challenging. One of our biggest challenges was interference by other people in the room, such as parents, helping to provide children with support and ideas for what questions they might ask, or reminding them of things that they had learned about. So we did have quite a few children that had to be excluded, and we actually have a paper coming out where we discuss some of these challenges if you're interested. Here you can see just some descriptive data on the tasks for the Explore and Learn. We saw that children really liked clicking on the shapes and hearing the facts. So on average, they clicked about 20 times out of a potential 27. When we looked at how many children actually clicked through all 27 pieces of information, we found more than half of children did this. They were considered at ceiling. So you'll see when we look at research questions later on, we do end up looking at a split of children who did and did not explore at ceiling. For the questions asked for problem solving, on average, children asked about 6 questions. We did have 5 children who were outliers, and they asked more than 14 questions, which was above 2 standard deviations over the mean. But even when removed, we still had non-normal data. So we used non-parametric tests and included all of these children in those in this analysis, as you'll see. So to remind you of our research questions, here they are. And the first question was, does curiosity support learning? So you can see here, this question was explored using that Explore and Learn task, where children first had the chance to explore these 9 shapes, each up to 3 times. And then we asked them or prompted them, what did they remember from the task that they had learned? We showed them a few pictures and asked them again if there was anything else they remembered. And what we found, not surprising, is that the more things that children heard or clicked, the more things they remembered. But remember, most children did click all of the shapes, so there was not a whole lot of variability in how much children had actually heard and learned, but we do see that relationship. At the end, remember, we asked, what else would you like to know, as a way of assessing curiosity? And what we did was we looked at the number of things that children were curious about that they named, that they told us they wanted to know, and the association between that frequency of responses with how much they recalled on the task as a way of looking at their learning. And what we found is that the number of curiosities given did relate to children's recalled information. And this was true even when we did control for how much overall children had learned, because of course you'd expect that more curious children might click more information and so have more opportunities to learn. But even when we controlled for that, we still see this significant association. So very interesting and exciting for us to think about how curiosity might be related to this learning. We also thought it would be kind of interesting to look at children's exploration within the task, just to kind of see, like, what do children do? How do they choose what to explore and when? So we looked at, so far, all we've done is look at these 2 patterns of exploration. One of them we call depth exploration, which would be children exploring the same topic until they have exhausted all of the opportunities for hearing information about that one, and then moving on to the next topic, as opposed to breadth exploration, where they kind of skip around and click different shapes and then come back to other ones. So we were just curious to see, what do children do? What does our exploration look like? And we found that by far breadth exploration was much more frequent. In fact, 42% of children never clicked on the same shape more than twice in a row. On average, children tended to click a shape twice in a row about 3.5 times total. So out of 9 shapes, they might click one twice in a row 3 times. And remember, they could click it 3 times. Only 31% ever clicked a shape all 3 times in a row, and only 3 children total clicked all of the shapes 3 times in a row. We see a small correlation between depth exploration and age, suggesting that maybe this pattern changes over time. But of course, we don't have enough data to explore that in more depth right now. Okay, so moving on to our second research question. Again, we wanted to look at whether curiosity related to children's ability to use questions in a problem-solving task. And the short answer is that we did not see differences, as you can see by this distribution. As a reminder, we looked at this in terms of children who explored at ceiling and did not, because more than half the sample was in that group that did. So you can see here the dark green bars are those that explored at ceiling and the light blue bars are those who did not. And there's quite a bit of overlap in those distributions of how many questions children asked. So we did not see differences there. And then of course, we wanted to look at whether children's curiosity promoting language in the problem solving task could relate to children's use of questions for problem solving. So let me tell you a little bit more about what those 3 conditions I mentioned earlier look like. Remember, this is for the zoo detective task where children were trying to figure out what was the mystery animal hiding behind the curtain. And what we did was we gave all children heard similar instructions that were short, about 100 words long, and then were prompted to ask questions or try to find clues for what the animal might be. But we did have slight differences in those 100-word explanations of the task. So for example, we talked about for comfort with and recognition of uncertainty, we talked about how it was fun to figure things out and really emphasize solving a mystery and figuring out. And then in our support and encouragement for information seeking, we talked about kind of strategies for finding clues. We gave all children 2 examples, one open-ended, one closed-ended, about types of information that they might be able to find out. So kind of how big is it? The size was an open-ended question. And then whether it's a mammal or reptile was a closed-ended question that was given as examples. And then we kind of gave a final prompt of what would you like to do in the control group? What would you like to ask in the comfort with and recognition of uncertainty group? And what would you like to know in the support and encouragement of information seeking? I'll give you a minute here to look through and see some of the differences in the script. Okay, so as a reminder, children ask quite a few questions on average, but when we split across conditions, we do not see differences in how many questions were asked. So again, I have the distributions here because of the non-normal data, and you can see there's a lot of variability, but the distributions are pretty much overlapping. And this was even when we looked across yes/no questions and an open-ended questions. They did, you can see here, ask many more yes/no questions or closed. They weren't all yes/no, they might be, is the animal big or small? But the closed-ended questions were much more frequent than the open-ended questions. So overall, we saw children ask more questions than we expected and more than we saw in prior studies, but we didn't see differences across the groups. However, when we went back and actually coded our conditions to see how strictly they adhered to the different protocols of the 3 different conditions, we saw that there were actually multiple protocol errors for most participants. So what this means is, for example, the control group children might have been asked what would you like to ask or would you like to know instead of what would you like to do? And they might have, all children, all conditions might have heard things like, that's a great question, or some kind of reinforcement or support for that information seeking behavior. So there was not as much distinction between the different conditions as we had intended for there to be. So in summary, we're still working on thinking about using language interventions like slight differences in language to promote curiosity. It did seem like the children were able to think of a lot of questions, and we don't know whether or not that relates to curiosity. We didn't have, super strong measures of this, or maybe this task isn't really one that could benefit from being more curious because it's not curiosity driven. It's not related to what the children want to know. It's more related to what we're telling them that they should be trying to find out, but that does happen in education context. So we do want to think about, when is curiosity promotion most helpful, and can we do it, and on what kinds of tasks? We were also surprised that exploration on the information seeking task wasn't related to using questions on the problem solving task. So thinking more also about, what does this mean? We did find that curiosity related to learning in the exploration task. And so when children were the ones kind of deciding what is it that they wanted to learn, they did seem better able to recall that information and retain the information that was learned. And we do have other exciting new measures and next steps in this work already underway that I look forward to sharing with you in the future. And I think we have a couple minutes to talk about 2 of those right now. We have a survey style measure that we're working on developing for young children based on a model that has been successful in other studies that I've recently published. And we're seeing some pretty great reliability so far for our curiosity and our creativity subskills. So I look forward to gathering more data to look at the psychometrics of this. And then we also have an exploration task that is more related to ways that I've looked at curiosity in the past, where we manipulate the amount of information that children might be able to gain and then constrain their choices. So they have to choose among different levels of uncertainty or possible information to be learned. So we can see kind of more at that preference for uncertainty and where different preferences lie for children. So that's all the time I've got. Here's my email if you want any more information about anything I've talked about. And as some final takeaways, we found that curiosity did relate to learning and children engaged in a more breadth and depth type of exploration. And we're working more about thinking about how we can use what we are finding out about curiosity and curiosity promotion to think about educational applications. We've got a lot of fun new work happening, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to having our discussion.